Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? Woo! Come on, no better than that. I am so excited to see you all and welcome you to our full slate of meeting activities today. This is our first Scholar Plenary. So if you're a PI, our PI Plenary is located not in this room, but in a different room. And I know it gets confusing. So it's in the West Tower where we had our NSF business meeting. The best way to get there is to come out, make a left past the neon sign there, take those escalators up one floor, and keep going left through the maze till you find the Regency Ballroom in the West Tower. Just wanted to help guide anybody if they needed those directions. I am Tara King, and I have the privilege of working at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, where I coordinate the STEM Resource and Evaluation Center. So it's truly an honor and a privilege to do the work that I do. In my job every day, my efforts either directly or indirectly support you, our nation's STEM scholars. You are tomorrow's leaders and problem solvers in STEM. And let me tell you, your talents, ingenuity, and resilience are truly amazing. The future is looking so bright with you all standing at its forefront. So please give yourselves a round of applause. So speaking of meaningful and fulfilling work, I am thrilled to introduce our plenary discussion this morning. We have assembled an incredible panel of individuals engaged in a wide array of work in STEM who have graciously agreed to share their experiences and lessons learned among their STEM journeys. Their valuable insights can help you to explore, navigate, and build your own unique and fulfilling STEM career pathways. Please note that this session is not only a discussion amongst the panelists, but also involves engagement with you. There will be a dedicated time to incorporate your questions. And at that point, you may either line up at one of the microphones around the room or enter your questions in the guidebook app. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our discussion moderator, Dr. Jocelynn Pearl. Jocelynn is a biotech scientist, podcaster, and writer. Her research focuses on developing novel therapeutics in the gene and epigenome editing space and investigating gene regulation and brain disorders. Her passion lies in creating next-generation therapies for devastating illnesses for which there is no cure. In addition, Jocelynn hosts and produces the Lady Scientist podcast, a show which aims to break down barriers to becoming scientists and researchers. Yeah, I'll give that a whoop. So Jocelynn received her undergraduate degree from the University of California at Berkeley and her PhD from the University of Washington. Thank you so much, Jocelynn. And right now, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tara. And I just want to thank Tara and Jamila and all of AAAS for organizing this amazing meeting. It's a huge event, and I know a lot of work goes into putting something like this together. So it's my pleasure to introduce our panel today on diverse careers in STEM, and I think we all share some interesting similarities in our stories, and I'm excited to dive into how we all got to where we are today. So with that, I'd like to welcome Erin Winick Anthony. She's a science communicator. She has an amazing TikTok, and she founded a company called STEAM Power Media, and she helps scientists tell their stories online. I'd also like to welcome Olivia Castellini. She has what she's said is a dream job in the sense that she puts together science exhibits at the Griffin Museum. And I'd also like to welcome Bernadette Mary Dineen. She's a graduate student at Tufts University, and she studies astrochemistry, something that I don't know a lot about, but involves something called a Mars chamber. So I'm excited to learn more about her work. And last but not least, we have Zach Shum from Iowa State University. He's an insect diagnostician. And I never thought I would share the stage with an insect doctor. So thank you all for being here. So to just demonstrate how different our day-to-day lives are across these varied STEM directions, I'd like to start off with asking you all to share a bit about what your week or month has been like, maybe a highlight, something exciting that happened for you in the last couple of weeks at your job, so that we can get a sense of what it is that you do. And maybe, Olivia, let's start with you.
Well, the first thing that came to mind was my 5-year-old coming and reviewing an exhibit and then talking trash about it and yeah, good morning. It's great to see everybody. I am an exhibit developer at the Griffin Museum of Science and Industry. So my job involves making science exhibits for kids. So taking an idea and then figuring out like what would be fun to do in a museum. So not only do I create new exhibits, I also help maintain the exhibits that are there. So in this, we opened a brand new exhibit in May, and now I'm sort of shifting over to developing early concepts for some new exhibit ideas. And also, I've taken over reviewing our early childhood exhibit, which is where my 5-year-old comes in. So in this wonderful, like, take your daughter to work day moment, I'm like, well, can you help me review the exhibit? And we'll go through, and then you can tell me what works, what you like, what you don't. And that girl took me seriously. Like, she went through and was like, Mom, the blocks over here need to be bigger, and this doesn't work. And can we take this to... So she found we had a book nook, and it had a little e-reader book, and it wasn't working. And so she's like, Mom, it doesn't work. I'm like, well, I know who you can talk to. She's like, well, can we go to his office right now? So she takes the book out of the exhibit, and I walk her up to my colleague's office, and I'm like, well, this is Mr. Lee. She's like, this does not work. It needs new batteries. It needs them now. And he's like, oh, okay. And so he's like, drops everything, finds a screwdriver, switches out the batteries, and she's like, well, thank you. I will go put this back now, because so your exhibit can work. It's like, okay. So being humble and taking feedback from anywhere is a big part of my job.
Amazing. Bernadette, how was your week or month? Anything exciting to share with us?
Yeah. Also, like, really excited to be here and see all of your faces. When you're, as many of the people on this panel know, when you're getting your PhD, it's really a lot of failure. So that's been my month. Right now I'm trying to get a method for extracting gas out of our Mars chambers to direct inject into one of our instruments, because the current instrument attached to the Mars chamber is not detecting the gas properly that I'm trying to analyze. And I do work in regard to the surface of Mars. And so this past month has been me trying to hit my head against a wall to get this process to work, because we keep the chamber at a really, really low pressure, and the type of syringe that we have is not compatible with that pressure, which is a different pressure from the instrument. And so just trying to figure out how to measure the things I'm looking for is what I'm working on right now.
Lots of troubleshooting. I feel like that's standard in science. We have to become really good troubleshooters. Erin, what about you? Anything exciting from this last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I'll say this is not my typical week, but it's probably been one of the most exciting weeks of my career. I've been on 5 plane flights so far this week, because I flew on 2 0G parabolic flights this week.
Whoa.
So I worked at NASA for about 4 years. Communicating microgravity science was conducted aboard the International Space Station by the astronauts. So a lot of writing, social media. But I went independent about 1.5 years ago. And one of the coolest things is now I get to be a little closer to the science, because NASA science is amazing, but they're not really sending science communicators to space, so I don't really get to see that science happen in person. So 0G, the people who do these parabolic flights, reached out because they wanted to better share the research that they do on these flights, because about half of what they do is research. And I got to fly with the scientists and help film videos to be able to share the research that they were doing on the 30 parabolas up and down. So 2 days in a row, interview them on the ground. And I'm announcing this next week online, so you're getting a preview. And then I'll be sharing a bunch of videos that I made about that research. So like I said, not typical. A lot of other weeks I'm at the computer doing lots of script writing, but very, very cool.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. All right, last but not least, Zach.
It's hard to follow up. So yeah, I mean, as an insect diagnostician, and also good morning, everybody. It's great to be up here. So as an insect diagnostician, like our laboratory, the ISU Plants and Insect Diagnostic Clinic, we more or less function as plant doctors. So individuals that have a sick plant in their home garden, or a farmer with 2,000 acres has a diseased plant or a plant with a virus or an insect problem on their plants, they can send those samples to us. We diagnose, we do all the virus testing, disease testing, whatever, and we get back in touch with those clients and share science-backed information in a way that the public or the grower can understand. So as the insect diagnostician, I do all those insect identifications, mite identifications. A lot of people stomp on a spider in their house and send me a picture of it and ask me what it is. That's probably like 80% of what I do. But honestly, like once October hits, my job slows down quite a bit. So the past month for me has been kind of boring because when it's not growing season and really warm outside, my work tends to slow down a little bit. So my winter, once we get into like late November or December, I'm doing a lot of extension and outreach activities where I'm making or developing talks and giving it to stakeholders throughout the state. But yeah, for the past couple of weeks, I've been like relatively, well, I'll say bored, even though there's like a lot of computer work to do. But October, November timeframe is time for us to like sit back in the chair and just take a breath from running around for months. So, but other than that, yeah, just identifying a lot of insects under microscopes. We do DNA extractions. I always love doing molecular work. I'm not a molecular biologist, but I know how to follow a recipe and extract insect DNA. So,
I think that makes you a molecular biologist.
Yeah, but I just like the students that I train, like the undergraduates that we hire, they're always like, what's happening here and here and here? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm just following the directions.
The kit phenomena. Amazing. And for myself, I've spent the last 6 months building a new lab in Mexico as part of a new translational research center that I'm helping to start. And so we just were able to run our first and second experiment, and it was really exciting to get back into that phase of running experiments, getting results, getting data, looking at my flow plots. So it was a very happy day for me. So that gives you a sense of where we are today, but I want our panelists to take a step back to where you were in undergrad and set the stage for how you were thinking about your career at that point in time. Did you know where you were going to end up? You know, how are you planning ahead and thinking about these things? So Erin, maybe we can start with you.
Sure, absolutely not. I never imagined this is where I would be. I kind of thought at the time the only like science communicator job was like Bill Nye or nothing, you know? But I've learned there's a lot more jobs than that. But no, so my undergrad is in mechanical engineering. I've always loved making things, but when I was going into school, I really debated going into journalism or engineering. But I figured I wanted to get that technical background, and I could always go back to journalism if I wanted, and you know, I kind of found my way to merge both of those passions. But in undergrad, no, it was very hard because I saw a lot of people around me that were getting those jobs at Google and John Deere, and I was doing all those engineering internships that could have gotten me those jobs, but I just felt like that wasn't exactly where I wanted to spend the rest of my career. So when I graduated, I took a leap and I had started my own company that at the time made science and engineering inspired jewelry, and freelanced and did that and was like, okay, I'm gonna take this chance to find my own path. And luckily I got an internship at The Economist in London, writing for their science and technology section that was like, okay, this is a lot closer to what I want to be doing, and helped me kind of find that place outside of what maybe all of my other engineering colleagues were doing.
Amazing. And Olivia, what was undergrad like for you?
Well, I shared the same like total lack of intentionality, and this is not what I thought I was going to be when I grew up. Because nobody, like you go to museums and nobody thinks someone has to make the stuff that's there. So my job's kind of like toy tester, like that exists, really? But the decision making when I was leaving undergrad was more driven by abject fear. because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was a music major, actually. I double majored in music and physics, and I really loved music, but I was too afraid to go get an MFA and be a starving artist my whole life. And I liked physics, and I'd done internships and all the things, but wasn't totally like, this is what's, my heart's, this is my passion, this is what I want to do. But when I found out that like almost nobody else wants to go into physics, so they'll pay you to go to grad school for it, I was like, sweet, I'm in. And it bought me some time, which is the worst motivation ever for going to grad school, so don't do that. But it turns out, actually, I really do, like, I love science. I've always loved science. But I didn't really, it was really more that, like, well, I like it, so I'll just keep doing this while I try to figure it out. So when I entered into grad school, and that decision was more like, this seems like something I'm interested in. I don't know where it's going, but I will follow this path this way.
And Bernadette, what about you?
My undergrad was, there was a little similar in that I didn't necessarily have a ton of specified direction, but I did know that my decisions at that time were more financially driven because I was kind of a breakout from my family. I was a first-generation college student. Half of my family barely graduated high school. So I knew that going into undergrad, I really wanted to be able to be financially secure. And so part of why I chose the sciences is because there's a lot of financial security in science and the types of jobs that we do. And so that really guided my decision to enter the scientific field. And then I bounced around the sciences a little bit. Most scientists, if not all, are just innately curious, and there was so much that I wanted to learn and do. And because of that, I had a hard time making a choice for where I wanted to land in science, but ultimately ended up choosing chemistry as my major because the department was friendly to me. They treated me kindly. They welcomed me into the department at my undergrad with very open arms, and I found like-minded people who wanted to pursue knowledge for the sake of curiosity and not for the sake of competition. And so that's kind of how I found myself through undergrad. And then applying to graduate school was also just a little bit unexpected. I, towards the end of undergrad, wanted to attend medical school. And then even after I graduated and worked, wanted to attend medical school, and then woke up one morning and decided, oh my God, I don't want to attend medical school. I want to go get my PhD in chemistry where I can study space. And then that's what I did.
Yeah, I want to get into some of those, challenging wake-ups or transformations that I think we've all been through in our lives. Before we get to that, Zach, what was undergrad like for you? Did you know you wanted to be an insect diagnostician?
Definitely not an insect diagnostician. I always wanted to be an entomologist, and there are times where I remember that I like a lot of other things, like I'm really into birds, but I don't know, I was really into insects as a kid, so my parents were just always like, you're going to be an entomologist, you're going to be an entomologist. So I often think of what would have happened if they said, like, you can be an entomologist, but like you can also do other stuff too. But that being said, like insects have always just kind of like been like the love that I've always had. And really for my undergrad, I was more interested in working in like conservation. I was super interested in insect conservation, wildlife conservation, so I got just a double bachelor's in entomology and then wildlife ecology and conservation. And then similar to Bernadette, when I was like thinking about undergraduate stuff, money was a really big factor for me. And because I was always like told, I guess we're going to get into this too, but take a bunch of internships. The more internships you do, the better. And I just never had the financial means to do that because a lot of the internships in my field were either unpaid or they just didn't pay enough. So I got into my career more or less because there was one job on campus at a USDA affiliated lab on the University of Delaware campus. And I just kind of like built myself up there and like kept getting like small increments of raises that actually like helped support my undergraduate career and paying my way through school. And that is ultimately what got me my master's degree program at Utah State University. And then because of that, and due to timing with when the pandemic shutdowns happened, that's the only way I found the job that I'm in now. And so I don't know, I never planned on it happening this way, but that's just kind of how situations in life made it happen, and I don't regret it. Like, I really love what I do, but it's not what I planned on doing at all. Like, not even remotely close. So.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, actually, similarly, when I started undergrad, I was interested in environmental biology, ecology, animal behavior. I took a lot of those types of classes at Berkeley to start out. I did an unpaid internship at the Dolphin Research Center where I got to create games for dolphins to understand how smart they are, which, you know, they're smart. They have personality and they're really interesting, but I saw that all of the people working there had to work 2 jobs, and I was trying to do that. You know, I was working at a restaurant in the evenings and kind of realized that if I was going to put so much into a career, that I wanted to do something that was financially sustainable. And I was also really interested in genetics, so I kind of shifted during undergrad and started focusing on molecular biology, genetics, and became really passionate about that field. So I joke that I now do indoor science. Yeah, so I think like we've all, you know, gone down these paths, found our way to, you know, different tiers of education, and I think one of the things I'm curious for the group is, you know, what kind of support system did you have over the course of your career? Who were you leaning on if you had people to lean on? And if you didn't have mentors or the right mentors, how were you kind of navigating some of these decisions as far as where you were going to go next? So, Erin, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, so I'd say some of my best mentors I did find were at my internships, because I mentioned I did 4 engineering internships, because on the other hand, engineering internships do pay very well, which is partially why I prioritize getting those, but also I think I might not have discovered science communication as early, because I was prioritizing trying to get those ones that would help fund the rest of my education and things that I'm doing. But I found some great mentors in there. But something I learned was trying to figure out the perspective that my mentors were coming from too, because they had gone through more traditional industry paths. And, you know, figuring out, taking some advice, but also realizing when I needed to rely on my own gut instinct there, and figuring out my own comfort level with risk. And so I actually found a lot of community online, on social media, for people that were doing what I was doing on Instagram, especially a bunch of women in STEM that I was able to then talk to and be like, how do you actually make this work as a career? Like, what is it like to be a science communicator at NASA? What is it like to be a science communicator for yourself and making YouTube content and things like that? So Instagram and a group called the STEM Squad were very helpful for me.
STEM Squad, I need to join. Olivia.
So family was huge for me, as well as mentors. So a little bit of both. So I am one of 7 kids in my family, and my sort of path into things, a lot of it was actually driven, instead of a career that would be financially sustainable, is something that I would love. Because as one of 7, like as soon as we started wanting things, my father sent us to work for him. He ran a produce company, and so we would go to work in the warehouse, which is incredibly glamorous work. But I spent from the time I was 14 until I left for graduate school, I would work in the summers in the warehouse. And I would be surrounded by people who, from the minute they clocked in to the minute they clocked out, they were just waiting for the day to be over. And it was just a means to an end to get a paycheck, and they didn't actually care about the work. And so as I went through high school and undergraduate, it became very important to me, and I became very scared that I would end up doing something that I wouldn't be passionate about. So finding something that I really loved and was driven to do, you know, day in, day out, was really the biggest motivator for me. So, you know, I was fortunate to have a lot of opportunities. I'm a violinist, so I was a music major. I've always loved math and science. So I had a lot of support from my family to go, you know, when I went to undergraduate, I couldn't decide between the two, so I ended up double majoring. And I had that same conundrum when I graduated undergraduate. And, this is where sort of the mentors in my academic career came in. Because looking back on it, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but I had a lot of good female mentors, which as somebody in physics is pretty unusual. I hope through the work that I'm doing and other women in physics are doing over the decades that's becoming a little easier for all of you. But I had, part of the reason I thought I was going to go to med school coming out of high school, and I ended up choosing a small liberal arts university where they didn't have a pre-med major. But I had an amazing high school physics teacher who happened to be a woman. And no one ever says, like, I had the best high school physics teacher. Like, everybody, like, no one ever says that, unfortunately. But when I applied to college, I was like, you know what? I can't apply pre-med here, but it's like, I really like my physics class. I probably had gotten an A on the last test before I had to submit my application. So that's how I ended up, because of this mentor in high school, I majored in physics as an undergraduate, and then it was a very small department, and there was one female professor who became my mentor. She was my advisor. So she helped support my application to grad school and prepping me for that. And then when I got to grad school, my mentor ended up being a professor who I never took a class from. She was not my advisor. She wasn't even in the branch of physics that I study, but we had to take a written qualifying exam by the time we finished our third semester. And ostensibly, the point is that it was supposed to prove that you had a complete undergraduate degree in physics. So everybody has to take it. You get to fail it once. You take it a second time, and almost everybody passes it. But if you don't pass it, then you get a third strike, and then you're out. So this professor ran a review course for the incoming graduate students to study for this qualifying exam. So we all took it like the second week we were on campus, and we all failed it. And then we spent a year working with this professor, studying for it. And everybody passed it but me. And I failed it a second time. And there's a whole other story there. I figured out that way that I'm a dyslexic. So just hit the,
Wow.
yeah, that's a whole other thing, yes. But she worked with me one-on-one. I was the only person who had to pass it the next time. So she spent an entire semester on her own time tutoring me, working with me, and helping understand the accommodations that were new to me because I didn't know I was dyslexic. And when I finally passed it, I passed it with 98%.
Wow.
And if this woman hadn't taken an interest in me and decided that it's like, I don't care what the system says, I can see that you are capable of this, and really invested the time in me. And so looking back on it, like the importance, and then I had a similar experience by the time I got to my postdoc. I also had a female professor who then, when I decided to do this weird museum job, she's like, if this is what you think is next, this is what you have to do. So really the importance of mentorship, and in particular in physics for me, strong female mentors at every step from high school all the way up through my postdoc were incredibly important.
Amazing. That's incredible that she took that time with you and made sure. I mean, I can imagine if I was in your shoes, I might have given up and not tried to take the test a third time, or just decided that it wasn't for me.
Yeah, or for someone to be like, well, you're not too dumb to do this, because you feel like everybody passed it but me. I studied for a year and I couldn't do it. And she's like, no, we'll get you there. Just to have someone who believes in you and can see the potential that you have is incredibly important.
So powerful. And I think when you do find those relationships in your career, you have to hold on to them and treasure them. I've certainly had some great mentors in my career as well. Bernadette, I know you've had maybe a very different experience, especially early on as far as mentorship. Can you share with us a bit about that?
Yeah. In regard to holding on to mentors that really take care of you, I have my clutches in my undergraduate advisor. Every time something happens to me, something exciting or some success or even failure, I call her and I let her know about it because she's one of my biggest supporters. But yeah, so I actually, in regard to mentorship and support, have been overall fortunate. I wouldn't have gotten to where I am without the support of all of the people that have cared about me in high school and undergraduate and outside of those things, whether it was family who had the strongest support and belief that I could do well, and then, you know, later on faculty and coworkers, I was able to kind of do what I do with their constant and really devout support. It's really been phenomenal. But there have been times when there have been others who kind of have this unfounded doubt in my ability to do things, and navigating that and not internalizing it has been, I'm not going to say it has been easy, but it hasn't necessarily been too hard, because I'm really kind of talented at ignoring people who who seem to think poorly of me. So yeah, there were some mentors in my undergraduate institution who had commentary that wasn't supportive, but that was really just completely diminished by the massive amount of support that I got elsewhere. But I did want to mention some almost complication, with the support that I've had. So when you are a successful, talented, or smart person, like everybody in this room is, there are going to be people that care about you and want the best for you, want their version of what's best for you. They might even see themselves in you and say, I was like you when I was this age. I was a hard worker. I was so smart. I did this. And you and myself feel almost obligated to fulfill those dreams. Even my family's dreams, where I was the one that got away, I was the smart one, right? They wanted me to be the most successful version of myself. And the most successful version of myself to them was financial security, was, you know, getting my science out there, being known for my abilities. But for me, the most successful version of myself also includes my happiness, and also includes like factoring in the unfortunate experiences I've been through to get here. And because of that, I have to take the support of the people who care about me with some context, because they haven't lived my life, right? There's been people who have said, you should go on to do this stuff. You're going to love doing space research. You're going to commit yourself to it. And they haven't lived through the traumas that I've lived through, right? So they haven't been able to compartmentalize and be like, well, that's just one aspect of me. They only know that aspect of me. And so for me, that support has been phenomenal, but it also, I have to put it in context, because they don't know every single dream I have for myself, so.
Yeah, great point. And I think Olivia touched on this as well, that sometimes as we go through our careers, and there are people who are ahead of us in a way that are more senior to us, we have to give them grace with what their experience has been, and how that relates to their expectations of us. And know that we might disappoint them in a way, but we have to kind of find our own paths in life and pursue our own dreams, just like a parent-child relationship, which mentoring often has that kind of connotation. So Zach, what about you?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add that hasn't already been said. I mean, I took a lot of, or got a lot of mentorship and like help from just my close friends that were experiencing much more similar things to me than, say, my family was at the time. I'm also like a first-generation college graduate. Like, my parents took a few college classes but never finished. So, and also, like, I was kind of far away from them, especially once I got to my master's, when I grew up in Maryland and flew all the way to Utah for grad school. So they were in, a couple-hour time zone apart. By the time I got home from school, they were already in bed half the time, So I really had to figure out new people to sort of rely on for that support and mentorship. So yeah, definitely, like, I always recommend, like, if you don't feel like you're getting a lot of support from your direct mentor, whether it's like your PI or your advisor, like, there are some other options there, some other people that you can talk to within the department, within the college. Find that mentor that really sees you for who you are and where you're at. So other than that, I don't think I have anything else to add. I also, like Olivia, though, like, I don't know if this is by chance, but finding a good female mentor is like huge. Like, it was huge for me. And I haven't put much thought into any of that, but when you brought it up, it made me realize too that my best mentors have been females. And coincidentally, the only one that ever made me cry was the one that wasn't female. So, but that could just be the chance. So.
Well, that's a good segue, Zach, as far as moving for my next question, which I think many of us in this field have moved or will move eventually for pursuing a new degree or pursuing a job, and I think many of us up here share that, and it can often be extremely isolating. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, and I'm very close with my parents who now live in Arizona, and it's always been hard on me whenever I've had to move away from them and had to get on a plane to travel to see them, and I just feel like the weight of that sacrifice in a way, even though I know they're happy for me. It is a hard decision sometimes and can be very isolating. So I was wondering if our panelists could speak to that. Maybe Erin, if you want to start us off.
Sure, yeah, very much so. So I grew up in Tampa, Florida, went to school at the University of Florida, and then I moved to London, and then Boston, and then Houston, Texas. And oh my gosh, can I relate to what you're talking about? Yes. There's when your family stays in one place and you're like, okay, I know that I need/want to do this, but it can be very hard to find that community. So I moved to Houston, Texas to work at NASA a few months before COVID hit, and you all know what that means. I had no local community. I had met some of my coworkers, but I really hadn't established much yet. And no, it was hard. I had my husband there with me, but that was really about it. And I think one of the important things that I learned from that was, yes, you need your work community, but you also have to really prioritize finding that community outside of work quickly too. And for me, the savior for that was I joined the local pinball community. I am a competitive pinball player as well, and I will say if you need a way to make friends quick, highly recommend it. But find whatever your passion or hobby is outside of the house and really try to find that way to meet people fast, because it helps with both the work feelings and your personal time and gives you that other outlet. But no, that is definitely a big challenge.
Olivia?
Yeah, it's similar, where it's like, don't put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing. It's like I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm probably the oldest person on the stage, so I've moved a few times. But getting comfortable with that, it never gets any easier to be away from the people that you love, the people who support you. But where it has always been, there's a certain kind of fear when I've made decisions of I can tell at the root of it that it's what is right for me. And so even though it has been hard to sort of take the leap, and I went to grad school in Madison, Wisconsin. So to move up there where I knew nobody, it's like I felt like it was right. And then when leaving Madison to come to Chicago to work at this museum to do a thing that I was literally told I was throwing my career away. It's like, but it feels right. And I didn't know anybody here either, and it took years to really establish that community. But staying there's a piece of staying sort of centered in yourself and confident in why you're doing what you're doing and why it's taking you where you're going. That will help sort of see you through sort of the rough period of transition. And then, finding your people, and they might not necessarily be in the lab or your job or whatever. Like for me, moving to Wisconsin for grad school, I started studying martial arts, and I found my people. As an undergrad, I was also in a sorority. So it's like I stayed very close to those friends. Because when I got to grad school, I am a physicist. I love them, but I don't really recognize I don't identify with them socially. So it was very isolating socially for me as well. So until I found the martial arts studio, I started working, volunteering as an alumni advisor for my sorority, and just started to work my network outside of where my studies were and where my work was. And that, similar kind of story when I moved to Chicago. It's like just building a network and a family wherever you are has been really important. And be patient, because it takes time.
I needed to hear that advice. As someone who moved, uprooted my life again 6 months ago, it's a great reminder to give yourself time. Bernadette, what about you?
I had a little bit of a different experience in that I specifically chose not to go far from my family for my degree. I wanted to be able to access them whenever I wanted to. I wanted to be able to drive home and spend time with them. I wanted to not navigate flights for holidays. I actually just hate travel to begin with. I get really bad motion sickness in the car. So a plane is even harder. So yeah, I specifically chose my school so I would be close to my friends and family who stayed local. So my undergraduate was in Massachusetts. My graduate program that I'm in right now is in Massachusetts. And wherever I go after this, I hope to also be in Massachusetts. No, just to remain kind of in New England, because I want to be, the most important thing to me beyond even my science is a level of community. And so you can, as the other two have spoken, saying you can find that community wherever you go as long as you're trying. But I wanted to also keep that aspect close to me.
And Zach?
Yeah, I think some of you in the audience probably would relate to this a little bit. So I've never been not close with my family, but I was looking to sort of get away from living at home. So long story short, when I went to University of Delaware, grew up in Maryland, I commuted every day. And that was nice, but I kind of started to sort of chew away at the really close relationship I had with my family, because I would leave at 6 in the morning, I would get home at 11 at night and repeat for 4 years, just because it was easier to sit on campus and just study and do all the work rather than just drive back and forth. And I think just because they never they took a couple of college courses again but never finished, it was really hard to relate to them with a lot of education related things. So I know that my family was kind of upset when I was thinking about leaving and going to Utah for graduate school. I was kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum because I wasn't really relating to them in the whole education thing to start with. So I still when I moved, I felt really homesick. I was kind of missing home. I was missing my family, but it opened up so many doors for me, just being willing to take that leap and say, this is going to make me a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm actually going to go do something that is going to end up being really comfortable for me. And having that closer support with people who know what I'm talking about, and knowing what I'm dealing with, knowing and understanding what I'm going through. So yeah, I personally didn't have much trouble leaving. There was obviously some emotions around that, but I was kind of looking forward to it. I was looking for a big change, and moving 2,500 miles away from your family is a pretty big change. So it was hard, but it for me it was kind of an easy decision though. I always got a lot of support from other groups of people. So again, I don't think my parents are able to hear this, but I have a good relationship with them, but I never felt negative emotions by making the decision to take a big leap to go somewhere else. Yeah.
I love how different all of our perspectives are, and hopefully this is helpful to you all. So I want to pivot to a couple of us up here who have gone through a transition in their careers and kind of realized that there was something else out there. And Olivia, I'd like for you to start by sharing, a little bit of your story as far as getting a PhD in physics and realizing that maybe there was a different path ahead for you.
I feel like I'm the poster child for this question. So we were talking earlier. So I sort of ended up being a physics major by accident, and then I got a PhD in physics out of fear of what else to do. So I did my PhD, and I was getting to the end of it, and they sort of tell you there's two routes. So you either stay in academia and you do research, or you go to industry and you do research. And that is when you've spent this much time working so hard on a degree and doing your research, that is what you do. There's also a bit to sort of, I guess we'll call it the patriarchal aspect of research, where it's who do you know, who did you work for, where can you get placed into another lab that then sort of expands the reach of your sort of research family or your expertise. Everything, the whole system is sort of designed to groom you for this. And when I got to the end of my PhD, I once again knew I really like physics, but I started, I didn't think I liked teaching. because as a physics grad student, you teach the intro level physics courses, and so I was teaching. I was at a large research university, so I taught the calculus-based physics for all of the pre-med and pre-engineering majors. And no offense, engineers are wonderful, but it's like it was just so antagonistic. Like the pre-med majors see you as personally as the barrier between them and entry to medical school, and so and the engineers just want to prove they're smarter than you because they're an engineer, not a physicist. So I was like, I did a couple semesters of TAing, and I was like, oh no, academia is not for me. And so while I'm not really sure I'm going to be like super excited to jump out of bed and do research 10 years from now, industry is the way to go. So I started interviewing for industry jobs, and I had some lovely offers, but there was nothing that I was like, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And kind of at the 11th hour, I came across a listing for a postdoc position doing education outreach, which was something that I had never really thought of and was actually actively discouraged in my lab as a grad student. The pervading, feeling was that, the greatest and highest use of my time was to do the research and be in the lab. And so anything, we needed to sort of check the box on the broader impact statement and then get back into the lab and do our work. So when I went to my graduate advisor and said, I want to apply for this postdoc, he verbatim said to me, "You are throwing your career away." And I was like, okay, well, I still want to do this. So I did it anyway, and he was not super supportive of that. And not to paint him out as a bad guy. I think looking back on it, it goes to a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, where it's not all of your mentors are necessarily going to understand, or your support system isn't going to necessarily understand your decision at that time. And they have their own feelings and their own experience. And so looking back on it, he was a young professor. I was one of his first graduate students, and the whole system is built on where you can place your grad students. And so when one of his first grad students didn't want to go to another lab and help sort of build the reputation and prestige, he didn't know how to help me. And unfortunately, in the moment, it came across as you were throwing your career away. So that went over like a lead balloon with me. So I'm like, well, I will show you, sir. I'm going to take this postdoc anyway. So I took the postdoc, and it was very scary because I was walking away from and being told, this isn't what you do. And I decided to do it anyway. And from the moment I started that postdoc, I loved it. Because it was the first time, as I mentioned, I was a music major. I went to a performing arts school as a kid, and it was the first time I was able to combine the creative stuff with the science stuff, two things that I had always loved, and I didn't realize that you could combine them in that kind of way. And so it was that sort of leap of faith and really knowing what was important to me, and what, when I read that postdoc description, it was the first thing in a sea of job descriptions where all of a sudden I just had that feeling, I was excited. And I was like, oh, I could be really good at that. But then knowing and trusting that feeling enough when everything else in the system and people who are supposed to be advising you and that you're supposed to trust help shepherd you to the next thing when they're like, no, that's not what you do. But knowing myself and trusting myself enough to do it anyway, seems like I turned out all right.
Amazing. Well, I think that's a great note for us to shift over to questions from the audience. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please step up to the mic, and we'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Zain Bakari. I'm a mechanical engineering and computer science major from College of the Canyons. And before I get into my question, I really want to thank all of you for coming up to this panel. I found it very insightful. I can't speak for anybody else, but it's helped me a lot with some ideas I've had about my career path. And speaking of that, this past semester I've been working as an STEM mentor actually instead of a scholar, and I found myself really enjoying the science STEM communication aspects of it. And this question is targeted towards Jocelynn and Erin, but I would love input from all of you. What do you think is helped you the most in building, transitioning from industry or academia into communication of STEM or like STEM communication with like either entrepreneurial or working for a company? And also, what skills do you think helped you the most in like succeeding in your space?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that really helped me was I started doing some freelance science communication, kind of was my part-time job while I was in college, and finding the niche intersections of communication and your technical expertise is the best place to find your first experiences. So I started writing for a kids educational company that was producing educational content for kids. And I wrote for engineering.com on really boring software update releases and things like that. The things that other people didn't want to do, but that you have the technical background and you also want to get that communication practice, and you might get paid for it as well. So building that portfolio while you're still in school is super helpful, and then just starting to share as much as you can. So whether that's LinkedIn, whether that's Instagram, whether it's your own blog, whether it's writing for your university publication, finding those places to really figure out, because there's lots of types of communication as well. Do you want to be on camera? Do you want to be writing? Do you want to do public speaking? Do you want to work in museum outreach? So figuring out that area for yourself. And then also I will say I am very happy that I had science communication jobs before I went to do this on my own. I learned on someone else's dime, and I built up some of those qualifications with MIT and NASA now on my resume that makes people want to be able to work with me. So I think those things were really helpful rather than doing what I do now right when I graduated.
Yeah, and I'll reshare this online, but there's a really great open source document for all of the different places you can pitch articles if you're interested in writing. And in the document it says how much they pay, so you can see which places pay better than others. And like Erin said, just building your community, your online network. For me, a lot of it was I would go to conferences as the person who tweeted out about what was being said, and I would go for free and be able to participate, and that really helped develop my online presence as someone who was communicating science. So thank you for your question.
I'll add there's a bunch of newsletters to sign up for with a lot of resources too, so I can give you some of those afterwards.
Let's go to the woman in blue over there.
Hello, my name is Sophia Bliss, and I know that two of you have experience in space, and that's an industry that I'm also interested in pursuing. I'm curious, how did you break into that field?
Great question. So when I was applying to graduate school, I knew two things. I wanted to do space chemistry, and I didn't want to leave New England. And so a lot of space-related research, whether it's terrestrial research or even things like investigating nebulas, things like that, is not in New England. A lot of it is in the South. It's in California or Texas or Cape Canaveral, like Florida. And I am heat intolerant. And so I knew I couldn't leave. So when I looked for programs to apply for graduate school, I specifically looked for labs close to me that their topic of research was what I wanted to do. So for example, when I applied to graduate school, I applied to only one school, and it was Tufts, because I wanted to work in the Kounaves lab because they investigated the chemical interactions on the surface of Mars. And I wanted to do that. And so that I applied, I met with them, I was really passionate, and I had done my due diligence in undergrad, and I was accepted, and I had no interest in working in any other lab there, and had a unique scenario where I didn't necessarily have to entertain any other lab choice. So my break-in was really just kind of finding a place that I thought I'd fit in well, that overlapped with my interests, and took the chance and applied.
Yeah, and I know looking at me, it's very obvious I like space. Maybe this is always what I was destined to do. But I didn't always think like space is going to be my job. But when I was writing, so I was, my first full-time job was I was the future of work editor for MIT Technology Review, and I was just really trying to find any science communication or journalism job. And since I had like an engineering background, manufacturing overlapped with that. But as I spent time there, I was able to be like, hey, what do I want to write about? And I kind of carved out the space beat, which they didn't have a space reporter there. So that's how I kind of got my like first experience. But I will say, if you're looking at breaking in from the industry perspective of like getting a job at NASA, I highly recommend looking at NASA contractor jobs. I worked for NASA, but was not a civil servant, so I wasn't a government employee. I worked for a small business that was hired by NASA, and there are so many more contractor jobs, and they're easier to get than going and applying on usajobs.gov. And so look up what like NASA centers you're interested in working at, and then look up the contractors that have contracts there and go to their job websites, because there's so many more job opportunities than might be usually you think when you just look at the NASA job listings.
Thank you.
Yeah, and actually a pro tip in biotech as well, contractor jobs are a great way to get your foot in the door. If you come in and really prove yourself in the lab, that can often convert into a full-time position.
I just want to say one more thing. As an undergraduate, there are a lot of opportunities for you to apply to NASA-related workshops or seminars or internships. Way more for undergrads than for grad students, but even if you miss out and you get into grad school, you want to do it then, there's workshops you can attend. I'm going to one next week for NASA, and don't hesitate to apply to those. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so if you're interested in entering that industry, just apply to everything that you can find.
Let's take our next question over here, please, in the white shirt.
Hi guys, thank you so much for the panel. A lot of great jokes and a lot of good insights, so thank you so much. My question is about burnout. I know, especially as an undergrad, you're taking this class, you're in this club, you're doing this team, you're trying to pursue this research. And when we come to events like this, we're told a lot, like, you can do this, you can do this, you can do anything. And truth is, you could. But then the reality is there's 24 hours in a day, and you still need to eat, sleep, hopefully exercise. So I want to know your tips and tricks for diet, sleep, making sure that you are getting that good work-life balance that can help us maintain our trajectory.
Well, they tell you have to do all of it, but you don't have to do all of it simultaneously, I think is the first thing. I might not be the poster child for how to balance exercise and work and everything else right at the moment. But really, I think it's, there is so much pressure put on, like, here's all of the things that you should do, and you should do the internships, and you have your classes, and this, pad out your resume. But it's like, take a deep breath. If you're not actually enjoying it, the world isn't going to end if you decide to only do 2 side jobs in addition to your main focus. So really making sure that you don't panic that not everything is happening simultaneously, and do make time for whatever it is that has nothing to do with your academic career that you're passionate about. Is it running? Is it cooking? Is it spending time with your family? It's like, because it's hard as an undergrad. It gets even harder as a grad student, as an entry-level professional, and on and on and on, because life is just only ever gonna get more complicated. So this is a good time to practice stepping away, because it's still, it will not feel like that, but it's still relatively low risk when you're an undergraduate to say, I'm not going to do this right now because I need to, my plate is full. So get the practice now and getting comfortable with that, like it's not everything all at once.
Yeah, one thing I was going to add to that is, so like knowing your limits and like knowing what you can feasibly handle. Like the biggest mistake that I made, and this is going into grad school, is I did some research on the insect I was going to study in grad school. So I walked in first day. It's like, oh, I already have a background on this insect. I did like invasion ecology, biological control, insect behavior in the agricultural system. And I walked in like just thinking like, wow, I'm a master's student. Like I'm going to do so much really cool work. And I ended up doing like 4 chapters for my master's thesis, which is like ridiculous. Like you needed 1. I think like PhD students needed 3. And I was just thought like it was going to be super beneficial to me if I just like did a 4-chapter master's. And my advisor never stopped me. But it was way too much for me. I did it and it was fine. Luckily, one of them didn't work at all, and one of them I didn't get like a full, like really good research paper out of. So just like knowing your limits and like knowing when it's okay to say no to things, I think is going to be really helpful in your career. I think when you especially like go into future academic parts of your career or just into a career, especially when you're first starting off, you feel a lot of pressure to just keep saying yes to things. And that it can be unhealthy to keep saying yes for reasons that we're discussing. So, make sure you're thinking about it. Make sure that you are, really taking, just taking a lot of thought to put in before you start saying yes to everything. Because for me, I created my burnout. It didn't just find me.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. When I finished my PhD, went through the most severe phase of burnout in my life, and I basically went on a road trip by myself and didn't talk to anyone for a couple weeks. And I think it's a relatable experience for many of us in this field, and I don't think I've learned my lesson necessarily as far as saying no to things, but I have found that pointing myself towards what I see as my purpose and staying true to your why. For me, a lot of that is how I can help patients, hopefully with my research, and that reminds me every day why I get out of bed. And yeah, I think it's hard to find that sometimes. It might not happen right away, it might not click right away. But when you do find something like that can be kind of your guiding light, it can be really helpful to avoid that burnout that I think can also be tied to the illusion that we create for ourselves as far as what these degrees and what this career should mean. And when that comes to light that it doesn't necessarily mean that, or it didn't have the effect on us that we expected, you can often go through phases of burnout or disillusionment. So yeah, thank you for your question.
Has anybody...
Wait, I have a piece of advice, actually, on how I avoid burnout. And it's a little morbid. Our time's not guaranteed, right? So if you have to keep in mind that you're planning for a future that you think is guaranteed. We don't know it's guaranteed. And so at the end of every day, you should ask yourself, am I happy with everything I've done up until now if I leave tomorrow? And if you aren't, then you should start changing your schedule. You should start doing things that you love more, because we're not guaranteed anything, right? We plan because we should, but we aren't. And so that is my morbid cure to burnout, is everything I do, it has to be something I'll be happy with if I leave tomorrow.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody's experienced this, but have you, and maybe some of you in the audience cheer if this has happened to you, have you ever just burnt yourself out so much on something that you love that you start to hate it?
Yes.
There's so many times like parts of my job where I just go into work someday, like especially during busy season, where like people are just asking me, what is this bug and how do I kill it? And I'm like, please don't kill it, that's a bee. And like I just get so busy with that stuff, and I don't find a solution to table it, and I'm just like, wow, I hate my job today. Like I actually hate what I'm doing right now. So I guess that's a little bit different than just burnout, but you can burn yourself out to the point where you question why you're even doing this when you know for a fact you're doing it because you love what you're doing. So just be careful. Like burnout can be serious, but I mean, for me, I created it, like I said. So.
Great points. All right, we have time for one more question. I'm going to go to person in orange over there. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Zoe. I'm an environmental science major from Northern Kentucky University. My question is for those of us who are nearing graduation and have maybe had some internship or research experience already, but haven't really found that thing that we're super passionate about or want to pursue, what would you recommend the next steps after graduation be?
Working. This answer might be like a little bit different for everybody. I always encourage, at least in my field, like when we're talking like entomology, wildlife realms, I hear from a lot of students that just, they're not entirely sure exactly what they want to do, but they know that they want to, say, work in academia or work in industry, whatever it is. And I see a lot of those students like jump right into PhD programs because it's like the terminal degree, and it's kind of like where they ultimately see themselves. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Oh, no, I was the one who did the PhD program.
And yeah, right. And so, you know, at least in the entomology realm, like I encourage people to like work. You can take a couple of jobs. You know, they might not pay huge with a bachelor's degree, but if you work different jobs, if you take more internships, like I mean, any of those options that will help you get experience in different realms of your field. I think a lot of students and a lot of individuals figure out what they like most or what their next path should be or what they want it to be based on just experience that they get. Like I said earlier, like I never had that chance because I just worked during my undergrad and like to get raises so that I could afford to pay the gas to get to campus every day and for food. And I kind of like shoveled myself into what I'm doing today. But I wish I would have had more experiences and diversified my portfolio. Not to say it can't work, because like I have a career and I'm happy, generally speaking. But if you want to dip your foot into grad school a little bit, at least again, this is in like life sciences and entomology, wildlife realms. Like I think a master's is a really good place to start, because at least for me, it didn't overqualify me for things that I might want to do, and it also didn't underqualify me, but it also got me into the grad school experience to see if research was for me. So yeah, long story short, like diversify it, try a bunch of different things. This is a really good time to do it for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, because one of the ways I parse it out, like, take a little bit of the pressure off. You're not deciding what you're going to be forever. Just decide what you want to do next. You know, and just something that simple of like just phrasing it a little differently for yourself. It's like, this is not the last job or the last decision you are ever going to make. So pick the thing that seems the most interesting, get the experience, and then when you do it, if it's not the thing that brings you joy or you're like so excited to jump out of bed and go do the thing, think about the things that you do like about it and build on those things and look for the next thing that builds on the aspects of it that you really do enjoy and really love. And then over time, you know, you'll find it may be look kind of random to you in the moment, but when you look back on it, everything will add up and take you on a path that is uniquely yours.
Yeah, I think I'd just say it's the try something mentality. And for me, it was finding my other niche interests and finding out where they intersect. And don't be afraid to look at your things outside of your academic career for your passions, whether it's sports, Legos, whatever it is. Like, look to these other places that you know you have a spark to light to get you going down a path that could be the career that you're passionate about. And yeah, I've pivoted so many times, and I will say it is scary every time. I've had nights crying, like, is this the thing to do? Do I want to move? Do I want to make this choice? And in the end, I look back and go, I'm so glad I just made a move. I tried something new, and it's almost always the right, when you just feel it, you're like, okay, it's time to make that next jump and try that new thing.
Great advice. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I want to thank our panelists for sharing all their insights with us. And I'll hand it back over to Tara.
Thank you so much to our panelists and to Jocelynn for being an incredible moderator. This was so insightful and really appreciate you sharing these valuable insights.